Hi guys, today I'm going to show you how you can upcycle your old wooden furniture. This is my trunk, which I originally bought at a boot sale for an absolute bargain of just £30. It's solid wood. It was originally white, but when I bought it I wanted to match it with my decor in my house, so I added the black panels. Now it's going to be going into my daughter's room, and her room has lots of whites and different colours in there, so I want to upcycle it for her so it fits with that and it looks really nice again. I mean, God knows it needs it. It's chipped paint all over it. The kids, when they were growing up over the years, they've had food on it, they've been in it, they've drawn on it. You know what kids are like. So I'm going to show you how you can do this for your furniture, because God knows if you have a family, then your stuff gets absolutely ruined in no time at all. So being able to upcycle it yourself is a really great thing that's going to save you a lot of money. Okay, so I've already started doing a little bit of work to this. As the lid was coming off, you can see the hinges were completely bent. I blame the children. And because they were bent and where the lid had been moved about over the years, the holes had become too large and it was just all wobbly. It was awful. So they're going to be replaced. So what I've done so that I can put new screws in there is, now this is a really good trick, I save my sawdust from projects and I sieve it with an old kitchen sink so that it's very, very fine, and then I mix it with PVA glue or wood glue. Mix it together so you've got a nice consistency, like a wood filler, but this is homemade wood filler. And to be honest, I find it works much better and is much stronger if you're filling holes where you're going to need to put a screw back in again. So I would just buy a filling knife as well from your local DIY store and start mixing this stuff yourself, because it comes in really handy. Bear in mind that depending on the wood, some woods are darker, some are lighter, so if you want to wax the thing afterwards or something like that, and you're not putting something in the holes like screws and it's going to be visible, say you've got a hole in your tabletop or something and you want to do this, you need to use the same wood, so keep the shavings from when you sand it down for when you need to fill it, okay? But yeah, I always do this. I'm, you know, a very strange woman. So I'm going to put that back over there because I've already done that. It's really tough stuff. I mean, I only did it a couple of hours ago and it's set hard in there. But this is all going to be sanded. Right. So, you need to sand furniture, wood, you know, you need to sand it before you paint it. So there's a few different things that you need to know. If you are painting the wood for the first time, then you need to sand it to create a key in the wood. And what that means is that when you use something abrasive on a surface, it actually scratches the wood very finely and leaves little scratched holes in it which help the paint adhere to it. But you don't want it really scratched up so you can see it through the paint. So what you do is use a coarser sandpaper to take out the imperfections and to take off any old paint or old varnish. Use a much finer sandpaper, the one I have here, before you paint, because that's going to give it a nice smooth, it's going to look smooth, but it is still going to have a key in it for that paint to adhere. Okay, I always use a sander. It's such a good investment if you get yourself a good sander. I use this all over the place for work and I use it in the house. It just cuts the time down of sanding so much. And if you've ever done any sanding, you'll know that it's really boring. It's the worst part of upcycling furniture. I hate the dust. It gets everywhere in places that you never even knew you had, and it'll be up your nose and everything else. So you need to make sure that your room, or wherever you're doing this, is well ventilated, or you're wearing a mask, because you will keep breathing this dust in, and if you're doing quite a bit of sanding, then that could affect your throat and asthma or whatever else, okay? So do wear a mask or a bandana or something around your face. You can also wear goggles if you're worried about getting the old dust in the eyes. It's not nice when you get a bit of dust in the eye, and you can actually scratch the surface of your eye. Enough about safety because I'm bored of it. Okay, so first of all, we're going to use our coarse sandpaper, which I've already put on my sander. This sander, by the way, is really cool because not only does it have a pad which you can stick the sanding pads to, which you can buy for this sander, but it also has these clips. So you can buy rolls of sandpaper like this, which are way cheaper if you're going to be doing a lot of this type of work. Get a big roll because they last for ages, okay? And then you just cut it to size and you clip it in, so that works out cheaper. This sander also has a pressure gauge here, and that means that if you push too hard, it's going to tell you, it's going to light up red on there, because a lot of people tend to blow up their sanders by pushing too hard. You don't want to do that, okay? You do need to have quite firm, you need to be firm with it, but don't push too hard with it. Let the sander do the work. It's the friction of that base moving that's taking off the paint and doing the hard work. So if you push too hard, you're actually working against it, okay? Yeah, if you want to know what this, that's a P60 sandpaper, which means coarse. The lower the number, the more coarse it is, okay? And the finer it is, the higher the number. So this is a 120. You can see there, okay? Should we get going with this? Ready? What you want to do is turn it on at the plug before you try to turn it on, because you'll look a tit otherwise. Just after a couple of minutes of sanding, I can already feel that the surface of the wood is much smoother. Every so often while you're sanding, stop to have a feel and see if you think you're getting there yet. It's also good to have a brush so you can brush off all the dust so you can see it properly as well, because when it's covered in dust you can't really see what you're looking at. But yeah, that's really coming along, and if I'd done that by hand it would have taken me maybe hours, because the paint can really clog up your sandpaper. So you always want to check every so often. If you're getting big globs of paint on your sandpaper, then you need to change it, because that's going to stop it working so well. Another neat little trick as well for getting in all these little nooks and crannies is to use an offcut, an old piece of wood that was, you know, headed for the bin, and cut yourself a piece of sandpaper off and to fit it around it, like so. And there you go, sanding block, and that will help you get in all those little nooks and crannies. A couple of other things to think about when you are removing paint from furniture is there may well be old lead paint on very old pieces of furniture, or more likely on old skirting boards that haven't been painted for decades, or they've had lots of layers of paint built up on them, and when you burn it off you're burning down to the lead paint, and that is really bad for your health. You can buy lead paint checkers at most DIY stores, and then you can find out for sure if it's lead paint if you're not sure, but do make sure that your room is well ventilated where you're working, or wear a mask. And you have to be very careful with lead paint, okay? This is feeling much better. I am covered in dust from head to foot now, but the furniture is looking a lot better. It feels nice as well. So what I always do at this stage is hoover the piece of furniture that you've just sanded to get rid of all the dust, and also hoover the surrounding area. If you don't do that, you're going to end up with paint getting loads of dust in it, and it's going to go cloggy, your finish is going to be nasty, and you just don't want that. You don't want it dusty, okay? So first we're going to hoover. So that's just got rid of every last piece of dust. Now for the fun bit, which I really enjoy. So my paints, as I said earlier, I'm using Rust-Oleum chalky finish furniture paint, and I'm using flint and mustard. So I'm going to paint the inner panels in the flint, and the rest of it's going to be mustard colour. So if you're doing a lot of painting, if you were, you know, painting lots of furniture or lots of skirting boards, you should really tip out your paint into what they call a paint kettle, which is basically just a container that you put the paint in, so you don't keep the tin open too long, and you're not letting other contaminants get in there. I'm not doing that because I'm not going to be painting very long. So you always need to stir this paint as well, or any paint, before you use it. Always stir it. And I usually use an old stick or an offcut of wood. Wait there 1 minute. I'm going to wipe this off as well. Guess what this is? This is a piano key. Remember my piano key wall clock? Well, this is a part of it. So be really careful when you're stirring paint, because obviously it can go everywhere. So what you really want to do is stir up. Look how thick that is at the bottom. Give it a really good stir. I've now got 2 coats of the mustard yellow chalk paint on there, and I had an amazing idea while I was painting, and I thought, why don't I paint the panels and the lid with teal satin wood paint? So that's what I've done. I've done 1 coat of that so far, so I do need to do another coat. It's touch dry, but you should always check the instructions on paint, and usually for wood paints and things like that, it's normally about 4 hours between coats, which is exactly what this is. So even though it's touch dry, it's not ready for the next coat of paint yet. Okay, so while we're waiting, we are going to sort out the hinges. So I popped down to my local B&Q and surprisingly enough found exactly the right size hinges that I needed, and they were literally a couple of quid, so perfect. And they come with screws as well. So these are the new ones, and this is how they're going to fit on. And these are the old ones. They're completely busted, all bent up. So the plan is put on these new ones, but as you find with quite a lot of old furniture, it's already been fiddled with to some degree by someone. Now, whoever put on these hinges has actually made a mistake with the hole that they haven't bothered to fix. So there are 2 holes this side that are very close together. So I know that if I fix these new hinges on, they're probably going to get bent up again in no time, because that hole is going to go straight through to the other one, so it's weakening the whole lid. And in my house it needs as much strength as it can get. So we're going to use my little homemade sawdust trick for this. Now all you need is a board to mix on. This is just an old piece of laminated MDF that I got out of a skip, and even though I wouldn't bother upcycling it or doing anything with it, it's really handy for mixing on. And here you can see I've got a tiny little amount of sawdust. It's only a tiny little hole. I mean, that's going to be too much anyway, but that's fine. And then you need some wood glue, and it's as easy as tipping out a bit of glue and mixing it together until you get the right consistency. It's actually harder doing small amounts of it, I think. Now this stuff sets really rock hard. It will be stronger than the wood was previously. So what you can do, if you think you haven't quite got enough sawdust in there, or your consistency is not right, just add a little bit more on top. Mix again. Now this is going to go off really quick, so you want to get it in the hole as soon as you can. So I'm going to fill both those holes and start again. because I think that was probably the root of the problem with why the hinges got so bent up, because they had the holes are out of line, so the whole thing's going to be wonky the whole time, and when it's getting pulled about over years and stuffed full of stuff and moved around, it's obviously not done it much good. So it's as simple as that. Done. We wait for that to dry. So in 10 minutes that'll be hard, and we can probably drill in it soon after that. So always check it. I mean, depending on the temperature in the room and where you're working, these things are going to take, you know, they might take longer or they might take a shorter time to dry. So always use your own judgment and check it out. While our homemade wood filler is drying, we're going to put the hinges on the lid. So I took 5 minutes to measure out where these were going to sit. I know it had holes in it previously, but if they were slightly out, that could be the reason that the lid came loose in the first place and bent up the hinges. So it's actually worthwhile taking an extra 5 minutes and just make sure they're in the correct place. And also, check that your screws are no deeper than the lid. You want them, well, depending on whatever you're putting them in, you want them to be big enough to hold what they're supposed to hold, but obviously if they're too long and they come out the other side, then all your hard work is for nothing. So make sure, quick check that they're the right length, and also that the head doesn't fall straight through the hole. Right, I'm actually going to leave the underside of the lid like that. I don't believe in wasting paint, and I actually think it's quite nice to be able to see the original paint. Plus it kind of matches the rest of it as well. Clever thinking, wasn't it? So I'm going to put this over the top, quickly check that it lines up with my holes, with the previous recesses for the hinges, I should say. Oh, it's perfect. If you are going to be using a paintbrush again within a few hours, then you can always just wrap it up in a plastic bag like so, and that means you're not constantly rinsing out brushes, and you know, it's a pain in the bum, to be honest with you. So that's kept nice and moist, and I can use it again and then wash it out when I've finished with it for the day. I'm using a nylon brush for this. I find that the man-made fibre brushes last a lot longer with wood paint, and it's always worth spending a little bit more cash on some good brushes, because honestly it drives you insane when you've got a really nice finish and then you notice a bristle sticking out of it and you've got to sit there trying to pick it out. It will drive you insane. Both paints have had 2 coats now, and this is the fun part. Now we're going to scratch it up. I'm only going to scratch up the yellow part because I want to make it look kind of distressed. And you use a wax over this chalky finish paint as well, and I have got 2 different waxes, one's clear and one's dark wood, and I'm going to show you how to use them together to create a really nice effect. So I'm just going to go all out with this. This is quite a coarse paper, it's a P60, and that's what I'm starting with, but I will go over it with a finer one in a minute. All I'm trying to do is just bring out these edges a little bit. Well, that's it all sanded and roughed up, and I'm going to give it a wipe over, get all that dust off again. It's already had a hoover. So that's the sanding finished. Thank God, I've got dust everywhere. I think it's really lovely the way it's brought out all of this pattern work in the wood as well, which is going to be brought out even more by using the waxes. Now I'm using Rust-Oleum's finishing wax. I've got the dark one, which is for creating an aged effect, and I've also got the clear one as well, and I'm going to be using a mix of both of them. So that I don't put lots of dark into the clear tin, I've put a little bit of clear wax on top of the lid there. Now be careful if you're using these in the height of summer or somewhere really warm, because obviously wax liquefies when it gets hot, so if you tip it up and open it, probably end up covered in it. But you should be able to tell by sloshing it around a little bit. So look, I'm using a child's old t-shirt. You want to make sure whatever you use, you're not going to get little bits of flint coming off, because it's an absolute nightmare if you try waxing something and you keep getting little bits of the cloth coming off in it. It's very annoying, trust me. Here it goes then. So I'm going straight in with some of the dark, and I'm just going to really quickly touch over it like this. And then before that has time to settle in, I'm just going to put some clear straight over it and rub it in more. Now you go over the whole area with the wax and you let it soak in for 10 minutes, and then you buff it up to a nice sheen. See, it's really bringing out the pattern work there, it's lovely. I think I'm actually working up a sweat after all that buffing, but this is turning out quite nice. The chalk paint has got a kind of sheen to it now because of the wax, and I love the way that this distress part's come out, and it's really making that blue panel pop. So I think it's going to look great in Tiger's room. I'm just going to put the lid on now, and then I'm going to go and find her and see what she thinks. But this is it, the finished article. I'm really pleased with it. I just hope Tiger likes it. These are the colours that I used. So you've got mustard, chalky finish, Rust-Oleum furniture paint, teal, satin finish, furniture and wood paint, and then I used the dark and the light wax as well over the top. So hopefully this has been useful to you. If it has, please let me know which bits you liked, whether you'll be trying out these paints as well, and send me some pictures of what you get on with. Thanks, bye.